Okay, I think we can start. Good morning to everybody and welcome to our webinar where we will launch this year's edition of the European B2C e-commerce report. My name is Luca Cassetti. I'm the Secretary General of Ecommerce Europe, and I will have the pleasure of briefly introducing this webinar. The B2C European e-commerce report is a joint effort of Ecommerce Europe, Eurocommerce, and the Center for Market Insights, which I'd like to warmly thank for executing the report also this year. Just a couple of words about Ecommerce Europe. Ecommerce Europe is the united voice of the European digital commerce sector. The great majority of our activities relate to EU public affairs and lobbying. So concretely, what we do is advocating for a new legislative framework that can empower e-commerce players to become drivers of further growth in the Union. For us, rules should be easy to implement and flexible enough to encourage legitimate businesses to experiment with new innovative solutions. Rules should also be effective in preventing unfair competition and also unsustainable practices. But for this to happen, for more than a year, we have been calling on the European and national decision makers to urgently ensure a level playing field across all e-commerce players active in the EU, and that no matter where they're based, so including third countries. And you can find more information on this pressing matter on our website if you're interested. We are quite pleased to see that our work at the EU level seems to have found a listening ear in many European countries. In fact, policymakers seem to now commit to make companies' day-to-day activities a bit easier, especially for SMEs. And simplification and competitiveness became the new buzzwords here in Brussels and across Europe. But now we think it's a matter of delivering results and of speed of action by the relevant stakeholders. That also includes enforcement authorities. This and much more is what is coming out from the exclusive interviews with the various CEOs, presidents, and directors of the national e-commerce associations, which are featured in the report, together with other interesting news and data. Before we dive into the content of the report, let me briefly introduce our distinguished speakers. I have the honor to welcome Ms. Christelle Delberge, Director General at Eurocommerce, which has been our partner association for this report for a few years already. So hello and welcome, Christelle. And I would like also to wish a warm welcome to Jesse Weltevreden, Director of the Center for Market Insights and Professor of Digital Commerce at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And of course, also the author and executor of this report. Hi, Jesse, happy to have you with us again this year. So in a few moments, we are going to hear from both of our speakers. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. You can, of course, post written questions via the Q&A button in the chat throughout the whole webinar. And at the end of the presentations, we will make sure to do our best to answer all your questions, or at least some of them, one by one. The webinar is recorded. You can find this recording later today on our YouTube channel, and we will be connected for no more than 1 hour. With that in mind, I would like to now invite Christelle to share her introductory remarks on behalf of Eurocommerce, followed by Jesse to present the key takeaways of the report. Christelle, over to you.
Thank you, Luca, and good morning, everyone. So on behalf of Eurocommerce, we're very proud to support again the annual e-commerce report, which provides a comprehensive overview of the evolving digital retail landscape across Europe. For those perhaps less familiar with Eurocommerce, we're the leading European trade association for retail and wholesale in Europe. The sector is 5 million businesses in Europe. The vast majority of these are small and micro companies. The sector is 1 in 7 jobs, that is 26 million direct jobs, and about 10% of the EU's GDP. Retail and wholesale provides an essential service to keep society running. Every day, we serve Europe's 450 million consumers and millions of businesses with the products they need at affordable prices. What's top of mind in the sector? Today, it's a combination of preparedness, sector transformation, intense price competition, and an urgent need, as Luca said, an urgent need for regulatory simplification, strengthening the single market and competitiveness. So let's dive now into the challenges and opportunities in e-commerce in more particular. On opportunities and innovation, e-commerce in Europe continues to demonstrate remarkable resilience and innovation. From the adoption of artificial intelligence to the expansion of circular business model, retailers are embracing transformation to meet the expectations of increasingly digital and sustainability conscious consumers. On the regulatory challenges, progress must not be hindered by complexity. I think that's a strong message from the report this year. Many retailers and wholesalers, and in particular SMEs, continue to face disproportionate administrative burdens and fragmented regulatory frameworks. So simplification and harmonization must become central pillars of Europe's digital competitiveness strategy. On enforcement and fair competition, our Compliance for All campaign is a call for a level playing field with third country traders and marketplaces. European retailers operate under stringent consumer protection, environmental and tax regulation, and it is imperative that all businesses, regardless of their origin, but selling to European consumers, are held to the same standards. A level playing field is not merely desirable, it is essential for the integrity of our internal market, and for many players in Europe, it is also an existential matter. This means stronger enforcement mechanisms, ensuring that non-EU operators cannot circumvent rules that European businesses must rigorously uphold. And we also call for coordinated European action, not left to the discretion of individual member states. On sustainability and SMEs, sustainability is a strategic imperative. Yet, scaling green logistics, packaging, and circular consumption models remains a significant challenge for retailers. Targeted support and inclusive policy frameworks ensure that no business is left behind in the transition. And a final word on digital transformation and tech. AI is playing an increasingly important role across all aspects of e-commerce. Digitalization offers immense potential, but the reality is sobering. Only 6% of SMEs meet the EU's very high digital intensity threshold. So bridging this gap requires not only funding and infrastructure, but also tailored guidance and capacity building efforts. The report that we're launching today is both a reflection and a roadmap. It highlights the opportunities we must seize as a sector and the challenges that we must address. With these introductory words, I'd like to hand over to Jesse, who is now going to take you through the key findings of the report. Jesse, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Christelle, and I'm really happy to be here again talking about the latest figures from the report. This is a big report that we do together with all the national e-commerce associations across Europe. It's a lot of work, and I'm always happy that we reached this point so that we can share with you all the new figures. Let's see. Yes. So give you the first glance of the new report. This is the front cover. And in my small talk, I will give you the main figures, the highlights of the report, as well as, I think, a little bit of a summary of what Christelle already told about opportunities and challenges that we derived from all the interviews we got from the national e-commerce associations, which are in the report. With this report, we cover almost every country in Europe, except of Belarus and Russia, but all other countries are included in this report, even some smaller ones in Eastern Europe, for example. So let's dive into the figures, starting with internet use. Internet use is extremely high in Europe, both in Europe as a whole as in the EU 27. And it's still going up, the figure. Every year we get a 1% increase in internet penetration. And there are becoming more and more countries in Europe that are already approaching the 100% internet penetration, especially in Western Europe and Northern Europe. That's the case. So if we look to the regional figures, we see that Northern Europe is currently taking the lead. In last year's report, it was still Western Europe, but now Northern Europe is a little bit ahead. But in almost every region, internet penetration is high, except for Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, there are still some countries with lower figures of internet use, figures around 50, 60, 70%. But also the countries in those regions are quickly catching up. So internet use is well embraced in almost every country in Europe. So having said that, let's dive into figures about online shopping. Online shopping is also increasing in Europe every year. For 2024, on average, 73% of all the total population of Europe was doing online shopping. And in the EU 27, it was 72%. And for 2025, we expect a further increase in e-shopping penetration across Europe and the EU 27. If we look to the regions in Europe, we do see bigger differences than with internet use. We see that Northern Europe and Western Europe are leading in terms of e-shopping penetration, and that Central Europe is following, but a little bit behind. But especially that in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, there's still a lot of growth potential when it comes to e-shopping penetration. Again, every year we see an increase of penetration in every region and every country, so figures go up. But still, there's a lot of untapped potential in especially Eastern Europe and also Southern Europe. So that's are really also the growth markets for the coming years, when more and more people will start shopping online there. All right, having said that, let's dive a little bit into what people are buying in the EU. We see that most people buy physical goods, and that mainly clothing is very important, as well as multimedia services like music, films, books, and games. And also paid subscriptions are high, as well as purchasing goods and services from private persons, which is consumer-to-consumer e-commerce, and also tickets, events, and transport services are high. And we see that those figures are almost every year pretty much the same. So the preference of what people buy online in Europe remains fairly constant over the years. The same holds for cross-border online purchases. Most consumers in Europe prefer purchasing from national sellers, but also there's a fair share of consumers that are buying from sellers in other countries, or even from sellers from the rest of the world. There are some smaller countries in Europe or island economies like Malta or Cyprus, where the share of cross-border purchases is much higher because they have such a small e-commerce domestic market. But on average, these are the figures also for the bigger countries in Europe. Having said that, I think the most interesting figures are always the turnover figures that we would like to share with you, starting with the figures for Europe as a whole, and then followed by the figures of the EU 27, and then doing some regional and national comparisons. So first, looking at Europe, for 2024, we saw that the total B2C e-commerce turnover in Europe was almost 820 billion euros. And we also see that the growth in turnover is fairly stable. So for 2023, we had an increase of 7%. We saw the same figure for 2024. And for 2025, we also expect a 7% increase in e-commerce turnover. However, if we control this growth for inflation in Europe, the figures are a little bit different, because especially in 2022, we were faced with very high inflation in Europe, which pushed down the real growth in turnover to -3%. But I'm really glad to see that we recovered from that, and that from 2024 and onwards, we again see healthy growth figures, even controlled for inflation. So consumers and retailers, I think that's very good news, and I expect that this will stay for a little bit longer. What we also always write in the report is see how eGDP is developing. So that is the share of the total B2C e-commerce turnover divided by the total GDP in Europe or on the country level. And we see that that figure is fairly stable, somewhere between 3.45% and 3.55%. But for 2025, we expect, based on the figures we have now, a little bit bigger increase. So in that sense, Pascal already told a little bit about the importance of retail in Europe. And this is only a segment of retail. And I think these figures already stress that this is still an important big sector when it comes to contribution to the gross domestic product in Europe. So now let's focus on some figures about the EU 27. We see that in 2024, the total B2C e-commerce turnover in the EU 27 was 660 billion euros. That's an increase of 8% compared to 2023. And again, like for Europe as a whole, we see fair constant growth figures for the years 2022 and until 2025 are forecast. So that's good. Again, if we control for inflation, the figures, of course, look a little bit different. But since 2024 and onwards, we expect there also to see good figures again. And for 2025, we expect thus a further increase in B2C e-commerce turnover to almost 710 billion euros is the expectation based on the data so far. Looking at eGDP in the EU 27, we see an increase after a period of almost a constant figure in 2024, so going a little bit up. And for 2025, we expect even a bigger increase. Of course, we only know for sure in the next edition of the report, but things are looking bright when it comes to the contribution of e-commerce to the gross domestic product in the EU 27. Now let's dive into some regional comparisons. If we look to the regions in Europe, Western Europe is by far the largest market, with 57% of all B2C e-commerce in turnover in Europe coming from that region, followed by Southern Europe and Central Europe, and Northern Europe and Eastern Europe are by far much smaller when it comes to the share in total turnover in Europe. You can also see that in the middle graph with the figures, how that compares. So Eastern Europe is still pretty small. But of course, there are many countries and there's still a huge growth potential there when it comes to both internet penetration as well as e-shopping penetration. So I think for the future, those figures can go up also if incomes increase of people and their access to the internet and e-shopping increases as well. If we look to the eGDP, we also see some differences. We see that the contribution of e-commerce in the gross domestic product is highest in Southern Europe, followed by Western Europe and Northern Europe, and is currently lowest in Eastern Europe. Before I close the section on turnover, I also want to show you some figures on the country level. Here you see the turnover figures per country in Europe. We see that biggest country at the moment is France. In the 2024 report, it was still the UK, but we changed the data source. So because of that, figures are a little bit lower, but still France, UK, Spain, Germany, Italy are the biggest markets in Europe for quite some time already when it comes to e-commerce. But also Poland, Netherlands, and Denmark are also among the bigger e-commerce markets in Europe. But as you can see in the long tail here, that especially countries in Eastern Europe are still not making as much turnover as the bigger economies in Europe. But if we look to the growth figures, which is in my next slide, the figures are quite opposite. So here we see that especially some countries also in Eastern Europe are growing really fast in turnover, whereas some of the bigger countries in Western Europe, like Germany, for example, or the United Kingdom, Denmark, Netherlands, are lagging a little bit behind in growth compared to other countries in Europe. So this is, of course, a good sign that e-commerce is rapidly evolving also in the smaller economies in Eastern Europe and some Southern Europe countries. I also have to say that there are two countries left out of this graph compared to the other graph. That is Bosnia and Herzegovina, because they have changed the methodology, and for that they almost increased in turnover of 200%. So that's why I left them out. And also we saw a very big spike in e-commerce growth for the Ukraine, because this country is, of course, unfortunately in war. Those figures go up and down very high and low because of the war and the uncertainties. So it's not really good to take them in this graph. But overall, I think the future looks bright again for Europe. I think we had a big growth in the COVID years, of course, and afterwards growth slowed down, and we were faced with high inflation for some time in Europe, but we recovered from that all, and I think we're moving back to a steady and promising growth of e-commerce in Europe for the coming years. That being said, of course, there are opportunities in that respect, but there are also some challenges. Again, Christelle, you already said a lot about it, but I will summarize it, I think, partly again on the slide. So first start with opportunities, and those opportunities are derived from the interviews we did with the national e-commerce associations. And what I already stressed multiple times in my presentation, we see a continued growth of European e-commerce driven by digital uptake, increasing consumer demand, and also innovation by online retailers. We see that more and more online retailers are embracing circular business models, offering second-hand goods, refurbished goods, and so on and so forth, which are also gaining traction among consumers. We see that a growing base of consumers is willing to choose for sustainable options and circular options, which is, of course, a good thing. And more retailers also see sustainability as a competitive advantage and are investing in things like eco-packaging, electric fleets, parcel lockers, and urban hubs to ensure that e-commerce gets greener and greener every day. although I must say that e-commerce is pretty sustainable as compared to some store-based retailing, but it's getting more sustainable anyway, so that's really good. We also see that there's a rise in consumer demand for convenience and flexibility, like self-service delivery, click and collect, and again the parcel lockers. So online retailers are investing in that as well. And what Christelle already mentioned, almost every retailer is very busy with adopting AI for multiple things within the business, from personalization to pricing strategies to demand forecasting and also customer service. So that's also a very good thing. And it's also good that there are more and more both national and EU funding programs to support the digital transition of SMEs, which is very important because they are really lagging behind in terms of innovation and digitalization as compared to the bigger online retailers across Europe. And as last point, as opportunity, we see that there is an increasing use by consumers of mobile payments and digital wallets, and also, of course, retailers are following this trend. Having said that, there are also some challenges, of course. The member associations state that companies are faced by complex regulatory frameworks, which lead to high administrative burdens, especially for SMEs, which we need to have an eye on and ensure that it's not getting too much for them. And yeah, the point what is discussed in the past years a lot is, of course, unfair competition from non-EU based sellers, especially from Asia, that don't play on the same rules. So there's not a real level playing field there. And it's important that we get that fast, because especially the companies in Europe are also now faced with high compliance costs, which makes it even harder for them to compete to those companies that are located outside of the EU. Another important point of attention is although sustainability is embraced more and more by online retailers, it's also difficult to scale up sustainable solutions, particularly for SMEs. And also it remains a challenge to ensure that consumers are really embracing them. Although the interest of consumers is growing and more people are doing it, still there's a lot to be done in that area as well. And again, we also see that the SMEs, especially, there's a skill gap and also some infrastructure challenges as compared to the bigger companies, which limit them in their adoption of technologies such as AI. And hopefully there are some programs that will help them in that respect. There also remains some economic pressure and some uncertainties in Europe as a final point. Inflation is going down, unfortunately, and economies are growing again. Wages are getting higher in Europe, so that's good. But still, we are in war in Europe. What the US is doing is still uncertain, and how that will fire back also to the purchasing power of consumers. And because of that economic pressure, we also see that more and more consumers are also peeking across the border, see if they can make a better deal there, and maybe delay some purchases or switch from new goods to second-hand goods. So although the future is looking brighter, there are also still some concerns when it comes to the spending of consumers in e-commerce. That's all when it comes to the figures from my side. My final slide, I think it's an important slide with a QR code, and a link which gives you access to the light version of our report. So for everyone who wants to read more about the figures, please scan the QR code or go to the link, and there you can find the report. Thank you so much. And now I give the floor back to Luca.
Thank you very much, Jesse, for this very detailed presentation. Lots of figures, a lot of information. So thank you very much for executing the report.
You're welcome.
I would like to pass it over to my colleague Margherita Corsaro for the Q&A session. We got a couple of questions from the chat. So if participants would like to send more questions in, please do it soon, because these two questions, in my opinion, will be we'll be able to reply to them quite fast. To you, Margherita.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Luca, for introducing me. So we have two very interesting questions, I say. The first one from Roberto Liscia. I think I'll maybe let Jesse have a go on this, and then we'll open the floor also to you, Luca, or Christelle, if you want to comment. The question is, in your opinion, why has Southern Europe a high percentage of contribution to eGDP? Which indeed, as you previously introduced before, yes, you indeed showed how this eGDP shares vary across macro regions, and indeed Southern Europe seems to be leading on this. Why is it so?
Oh, that's why it's so. Well, yeah, basically it's. I think there are some big countries in Southern Europe when it comes to e-commerce, markets like Spain, markets like Italy, for example. And for those markets, e-commerce is really big, and a big part of their economy. And because these are the leading markets in Southern Europe, and since e-commerce is very important and retail is very important in those economies, that's also reflected in a relatively high share of eGDP as compared to other economies, for example, some in Western Europe that are maybe a little bit more export based, which means that the GDP is comprised also of a bigger chunk of other sectors. So I think that's from my view, the main reason why it's a little bit higher in Southern Europe. But of course, these are small percentages, right? I mean, we're still in the margin of 3 to 4%, 3 to 4, 5%.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, I don't know if any other of the panelists want to have a go on this. I think I'll then go to the second question. Thank you very much, Jesse.
Welcome.
Then there is a second question by George Konstantinidis on digital money. I guess George is here referring maybe to the digital euro. Maybe Christelle, do you want to have a go on this one?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. And very interestingly, yesterday, together with Luca, we were at an event hosted by the German Central Bank, exactly on that same point around the digital euro. If all plans go well, the digital euro will be in place in 2028 at the earliest, if the legislation gets approved in 2026. That's the current plan. Now, we don't know. There's still a lot of uncertainty around it, with a lot of opposition, in particular a lot of resistance, in particular from the banking sector. There is a bit of uncertainty around it. I think events like yesterday, hosted by 4 merchants and enabling merchants to raise their voice, and that includes retail and digital commerce. Events like this can help raise our voice and accelerate the process.
If I can add something, I just included a link to the joint statement that we co-signed also with Eurocommerce and a few other players that was published yesterday. And there you can find some recommendations from the merchant representatives on how to make the digital euro work for merchants. So you can find more information there if you want.
Thank you very much to you both. We can maybe go to the third question by Adam Rieder, who says that there was an interesting presentation. So thank you very much. First of all, very happy that you are enjoying this exchange. So the question is about the pace of growth in Europe, and how does this compare with the global market? And does also Europe's turnover grows as well as compared to the total e-commerce turnover? I think this is rather for Jesse to have a go.
Yeah, and I need to be honest, I don't have all the figures for the global market by heart now. But what I do know is that on a global scale, there are some regions across the world that are facing some challenges. I know a lot about what's going on, for example, in Latin America and the Caribbean, and there a lot of economies are in decline, which also has some impact on e-commerce, but also especially in the more developing areas of the world, there is a transition of so I would say there's a towards more professionalized e-commerce, because e-commerce used to be there mainly C2C related, using classified sites, and now they're upgrading to online shopping malls, platforms like Amazon-like platforms. So there's also professionalization going on there, but the sector is transforming. And of course, I think Asia is still booming a lot, and we also see that because Asia is booming, we see that more and more platforms from Asia are expanding to other areas in the world, which gives some competitive pressure, especially here in Europe, which is an interesting region because of the high penetration of e-shopping and also the spending power of consumers. But also, I would say the world is pretty uncertain with wars going on, and also with the uncertain US policy, right? With the import tariffs. So it's very hard to predict what Trump will do next week or next month, but will impact the global economy. But again, I'm really happy to see that for Europe as a whole, as well as the EU 27, the future looks bright again, and that we are stabilizing towards healthy growth figures of e-commerce, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these few elements. Indeed, it's not always easy to interpret all the data and all the complex geopolitical situation and the impact on growth. We have then another question by Alexander Shiriak. So do you have, yes, any data about the impact of AI in terms of e-commerce growth? I know that indeed you are quite an expert when it comes to some AI applications, especially. So yes, there's a lot of interest, as we see by the sector, on the topic of AI and how this is shaping e-commerce. There are a few also questions in the report that have been answered by CEOs, directors of our national associations on the topic specifically of AI. So please tell us what.
Thanks a lot for that question. Especially in a couple of hours, I will give a keynote on a big event in Belgium, especially about this topic. So I can answer that easily. I think what I see also in e-commerce, that a lot of companies are now focusing mainly on generative AI. So they use AI, they use chatbots, they use AI for content generation. Of course, some of them have more advanced things like demand forecasting, price optimization, as well as recommender systems. But the majority of the e-commerce companies, and especially SMEs, are using Gen AI. And my advice to e-commerce companies and companies in general is don't get blinded by Gen AI, because it's just one segment of what AI can offer, and especially in traditional AI, which is around for ages, decades. And then I'm talking about computer vision, natural language processing, machine learning, predictive modeling, AI technologies like that. they can do much more for e-commerce, especially also in the back end when it comes to logistics and optimization processes. And I think still a lot of e-commerce companies forget that because everybody now is talking, when they are talking about AI, it all goes about Gen AI. And AI is much more and has a more profound impact. And yeah, my goal is also to show that to the world. And for that, we also have a platform called Rank My AI, where you can see especially how you can use AI for multiple use cases, both in the Gen AI scene as well as more the traditional AI scene. So a lot of opportunities, and I would say don't get blinded by Gen AI. And also, very important, if you want to move fast with AI, first slow down and ensure that your organization is ready for it, that your culture is ready for it, that you have all the systems and the data in place to really grasp the full potential of AI. Because we see a lot of companies just copycatting what their competitors are doing, and then they are running into some issues later because they didn't think things through very well. Long answer, but still a lot of challenges, although I'm really glad to see that in this report, a lot of online retailers are already embracing AI. It's a good thing, but they still need to do it on a more better and professional way, I would say.
Thank you very much for the long but very exhaustive answer, Jesse. I can maybe introduce the next question. So, is there any data about drop shipping sector in terms of e-commerce? So I can already announce that we don't have much of such information in our report. But Jesse, I don't know if you have anything to add on this.
No, we don't have that. But I think what we do have in Europe is, of course, the competitive pressure from sellers and platforms from outside Europe that don't play by the rules. So that's one part of the story. But the other part of the story, from a consumer perspective, before we got the big Chinese competition, we still got the same goods from China, but then they were imported by traders in Europe that took a high margin. So in that sense, competition in one hand is good from a consumer side because margins are getting down because Chinese sellers and platforms are coming here, which in theory is fine, but they need to play by the rules, and there it goes wrong at the moment. So I think a lot of dropshippers are in trouble because they are facing the competition directly from the Chinese platforms and also the Chinese sellers there, which can be good for the consumers. But on the other hand, those sellers and platforms need to play by the rules in Europe. And so far, that's not the case. And that's very worrisome for competition, I would say.
Thank you for having a go on this. So the next question is asked by Francesco Tribuni, talking about out-of-home delivery. This is maybe rather for our policy experts, if you want to have a go on this. So talking about the EU Delivery Act, the upcoming EU Delivery Act, do you think it will support out-of-home delivery through some guidance to increase delivery options at checkout? And Francesco also mentioned this already happened in Belgium in September 2024.
Maybe I can say something about it. It might be a little bit premature to know what the EU Delivery Act will contain. We are also not sure if it will be in the work program of the European Commission for next year. I think they are planning to present it as an initiative next year to update the Postal Services Directive. So we don't know about that yet. But I think in general terms, I heard about these initiatives a little bit in other countries as well. And for sure, if you have a parcel locker where you can leave your parcel there and the consumer can pick it up without the need to go to a pickup point or the delivery company have to bring it back to the warehouse and then try to deliver it again, of course, that's going to have a positive impact on CO2 emissions. So I think the more seamless, the better, I would say, for the consumer. And if we can cut at the same time emissions, then why not?
Christelle, you also want to add something on this?
Well, what we see and what should not be prevented is a whole area of innovation, innovation around delivery and ensuring customer convenience. So a lot of adaptation around that, and giving a choice to consumers whether they want to be delivered at home or in other in other pickup points or lockers, and we see a lot of investment and innovation in that area on the market.
Thank you very much to you both. There's another question by Adam Rida. Have you observed any efforts around AI or machine learning applied to product safety or compliance in general in e-commerce? Adam, I can maybe also have a go on this question as I work on these topics with e-commerce Europe. So we have seen indeed some at least technological tools that are being applied to for example scan product listings for product non-compliance notably or product safety. So these kind of tools we are seeing indeed both applied by the EU institutions, in particular the EU Commission, and on the other hand, also used to a certain extent by some operators, some especially large companies that has enough resources to invest in these big tools. And by the way, this is also one of the findings, the takeaways of our report. As Christelle was also mentioning, there is a digital intensity index that we report about, and indeed this remains one of the challenges for small and medium companies to invest in technology for improving, for example, compliance or optimizing some processes, etc. I don't know if maybe Christelle or Luca want to have also go on this topic.
Maybe from my side, I just wanted to mention the web crawler, which you already did. So thanks for that, Margherita. But indeed, the web crawler is also, there is a new version of the web crawler, as far as we understand it, that has been run by the European Commission in relation to product safety. It's something we have been calling for also in our level playing field campaign for a swift rollout of this new version of the web crawler. But to be honest, I have not heard yet about the results of this web crawler.
Thank you. I think more globally, we're pushing for digital solutions wherever this is possible, whether that's on labeling or for information transmission throughout the supply chain. So like the digital product passport. So all these solutions that can be enabled and facilitated by data and data sharing and digital data. This is something that we keep on pushing with the European institutions and also to create, to ensure that the solutions that arise out of it remain based on existing systems, so not to try to reinvent the wheel is one of our key challenges. I think we're having a commission now that's more open to that sort of discussion, so we're making progress, but it still is work in progress.
Indeed, I would just finish by saying once again, highlighting the what Luca was mentioning at the right at the beginning of his intro. Indeed, simplification, digitalization, competitiveness. These are all buzzwords that are now used a lot, both at the EU and national level. And indeed, these all three are very closely related with each other, and they can empower each other. And that's what we're seeing indeed also happening at the EU level. And with that, I don't see any other questions being asked. So maybe I will give it back to you, Luca.
Yeah, thank you very much, Margherita. So I think we can slowly wrap it up. I would like to warmly thank Jesse for the presentation and Christelle also for supporting the report and for joining the webinar today, and to you, Margherita, for the coordination work from the e-commerce Europe side. As I already mentioned earlier, you will find the recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel soon enough. If you're interested to find more about our activities, you can, of course, visit our website. Don't forget to follow us on social media. And maybe I can finish by saying that Let's make Europe a place where competitive, compliant, and forward-looking e-commerce can thrive. And with that, I would like to thank you also the participants for attending, and wish you a good day, and see you next year for the 2026 edition of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.